Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this special brain health and memory panel discussion. For those of you that may not know me, my name is Mukesh Jain, and I serve as University Hospital's Chief Academic Officer. In brief, my role is to oversee the research and education enterprise, which constitutes two of the main three pillars of the To Heal, to Teach, to Discover mission of university hospitals. I'm also going to serve as your host for today's discussion. So before we get into the discussion and introducing our panelists, all leaders within our institution, let me just express on behalf of the institution the sincere hope that you and your families are all doing well. It's obviously been a challenging year. We live in interesting times, to say the least. And we just hope that you are all well, and we're just so appreciative of all our UH friends and supporters to take time out of their schedules to join us today. The way we've organized our conversation over the next hour or so is I'm going to begin with a set of foundational overview comments, and then we're going to quickly get in with our panelists and focus on brain health, which is the main focus of our discussion. And I'll introduce our panelists, Doctors Bambakidis, Sila, Pieper, and Shaikh. And then we'll have a conversation. They'll give some introductory comments as well. And then we're going to open it up with question and answer with the audience, because the real purpose here is to engage with you as our friends and supporters and answer questions that may be on your mind. So let me begin with, as I promised, sort of high-level foundational comments. And I'm going to ask my colleague Amber to share a singular slide. And we'll give her a minute to get that. Thank you, Amber. So all of you know university hospitals as an outstanding place to get care, patient care. What you also note on this slide is that we have to heal, of course, as a primary mission, but also to teach and discover. And our vision, advancing the science of health and the art of compassion. So we are an academic medical center that's focused both on research and education, along with delivering great patient care. And the health system has a rich history of doing that. Many of you will know that UH was founded in 1865, and over this 154-year history, not only has it delivered great care, but it has advanced new discoveries that have changed the practice of medicine across the globe. And our efforts, as this cartoon, if you glance at the bottom part of your slide, you'll see that as this cartoon tries to reflect, our efforts are focused on discoveries that begin in the laboratory, what we call basic translational research, advancing those efforts to test them in people in clinical trials, and then eventually testing those new diagnostics, therapeutics, whatever the case may be, in large populations, be it within our community or globally. And in doing so, we hope to impact human health by changing what we call standard of care, how we take care of people. In short, the research component of the health system really brings in, if I can say it in sort of a pithy way, brings hope to the many, many unmet medical needs that still exist today. The organizing entity within our health system that oversees research and education is called the UH Research and Education Institute. And just a few high-level numbers for you. Our enterprise, the research enterprise, is about $160 million per year of external funding. We train about 700 medical students, 1,000 residents and fellows, and 1,000 allied health professionals, nurses, technicians, etc. So with that high-level overview. Amber, I think we can take down that slide, please. I'd like to switch gears and introduce our panelists. I'll also note for you that after our panelists speak, we're going to open it up for Q&A. And the mechanism for those questions is at the bottom of your screen. So if you glance at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat option. So please submit your questions through that. They will come either to me, our panelists, or administrative team, and we'll filter through the questions and try to get through as many as we can. So with that, let me introduce our first leader, Dr. Nick Bambakidis. Nick is Vice President and Director of the Neurological Institute at University Hospitals. He's also the Selman Chair in Neurosurgery. Our second panelist will be Dr. Cathy Sila. Cathy is Chair, Department of Neurology and the Humphrey Professor of Neurology. She's also Director of our Comprehensive Stroke Center and UH System Stroke Program within the Neurological Institute. The third panelist would be Dr. Andrew Pieper, who's the Morley-Mather Chair in Neuropsychiatry. He's an investigator at the Harrington Discovery Institute and Director of Neurotherapeutic Discovery at University Hospitals. And then our final speaker is Dr. Aasef Shaikh, who's the Penni and Stephen Weinberg Chair in Brain Health and Vice Chair of Research within the Department of Neurology at UH. And so with that, I'd like to invite Nick for some comments.
Thanks, Mukesh. Welcome, everybody. As Dr. Jain mentioned, I'm the Director of the Neurological Institute at UH. By further way of introduction, I'm a neurosurgeon by training and still very clinically active. My practice is focused on the management of benign brain tumors in cerebrovascular disease. The latter includes the treatment of intracranial stroke, as well as brain aneurysms and other vascular disorders. I've been at UH a long time, most recently since 2008. I've served as the Neurological Institute Director since 2016. In this role, I work very closely with the chairs of the departments of neurosurgery, Dr. Warren Selman, I'm sure many of you know him, and neurology with Dr. Cathy Sila, who will be speaking shortly. And we work very closely together to deliver neurologic services to each of our hospitals and outpatient centers throughout the UH system. It's worth noting that the NI is nationally recognized with top awards from organizations like the American Heart Association for its excellence in stroke care, as well as being highly ranked in US News and World Reports as one of the top deliverers of neurological care nationally. The vision of the NI is frankly bold and strategic. We seek to do nothing short of creating a future where neurologic conditions are prevented, treated, and cured. And we do this by leveraging the incredible UH system and maximize patient and provider engagement, which allows for system-wide access for our patients. And as Mukesh mentioned, we're very active in using the cutting-edge research that you'll be hearing about shortly to that our physician scientists work on every day to our patients' advantage and providing them access to the latest breakthroughs in their care. So I think today, hopefully you'll hear some about some of the work our leaders are doing in the realm specifically of brain health and memory. It's an area of incredible focus for us, and how we are working hard every day to improve the lives of patients with these difficult, very difficult to treat disorders in Northeast Ohio and really throughout the country. So thanks, Mukesh, for allowing me to give that introduction.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nick. And Dr. Sila?
Sheila, can you, thank you. All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Cathy Sila. I'm a Cleveland native. I went to Case Western Reserve Medical School, so I trained at university hospitals, and I've been back now for 11 years, first as the director of the stroke program for the health system, but in the last year as the chair of the department. So I'm very pleased to be here today and to speak to you about something that is really my focus in my chair, in my new chair role. I spend much of my time as a stroke neurologist and in a stroke prevention clinic. And many of the strategies that I use to prevent a second stroke and try to prevent a first stroke are many of the effective strategies to eliminate vascular dementia, which is something that we're understanding can be significantly prevented when we really know the targets and the strategies and the health patterns we need to follow. As we all live longer from cardiovascular disease and bouts with cancer, these demands of neurodegenerative disorders, though, will really be a serious threat on our independence and our quality of life. Certainly the dementias in their many forms, movement disorders like Parkinson's disease, and the long-term effects of traumatic brain injuries in the young and the old. In terms of education, we're also going to have a serious pipeline issue. It's estimated that less than 3% on national average of medical students choose to go into neurology for a specialty. Through many of our efforts and the mentorship and example in the Neurologic Institute, we've been able to attract 8% of our medical students to neurology specialties in the future. But even with that, there's going to be an inadequacy in the pipeline to care for us as we get older. So, brain health, there's a lot of talk about brain health. Your brain needs to remember things, learn things, plan, concentrate. It's what gives us a clear and active mind. We draw on the strengths of our brain to manage information, to think logically, to use our judgment, to have perspective, to become wise. And it's really about having a life that is the life that you view as the highest quality of life. Certainly physical abilities are one thing, but if you don't have your marbles, it's hard to enjoy other things. So our brain health initiative has really looked at the whole continuum of everything that we need to do from an individual's perspective. How do we prevent losing cognitive and behavioral functions? How do we develop early detection so that we can develop the best strategies for treatment when people might not even be symptomatic? How to come up with new diagnostic strategies and obviously better treatment strategies to prevent disease, but also to help us care for people that are affected by these disorders. Within the university hospitals and the Neurological Institute and our city as a whole, we have tremendous resources. And much of our strategic planning has been revolved around identifying each of those resources, putting them in this continuum and identifying where we have gaps and critical elements that we need to support to make the other parts work their best. And so that's really what you're hearing about from all of us here today. We want to expand access to the best care. And so we need to define what is that best care. And it needs to be very family and patient oriented. It needs to be the care that the patients and family want to have and the way they need to have it delivered, as opposed to historically the way perhaps we've been taught to deliver care or constrained to deliver care. We really need to enhance innovative research to think about these demands that will affect us in the years to come and attract that top talent who will be the leaders and the champions of this research in the future, and then delivering this to our patients and also to the community as a whole so that we have healthier communities. So part of this is also creating this framework for population health. This is not just about us and our families, it's about Ohio, the nation, international impact for many of the things that will come out of this program. So I really appreciate you joining us over your lunch hour and hearing about our bold vision and all the work that we've done, and hopefully helping us meet some of those gaps so that we can really be successful. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Sila. That was a wonderful set of remarks. And you mentioned innovative research. So our next two speakers are really national and international leaders in research, in different domains of research. And we'll start with Dr. Andrew Pieper.
Okay, thanks, Mukesh. And thank you all for joining today, as Cathy said, over your lunch hour, sharing it with us. I'm a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. Clinically, I work in the geriatric psychiatry outpatient clinic at the Lewis Stokes VA Hospital here in Cleveland. I see patients there 1 day a week. And then the rest of my time is spent in the lab. And the focus of my lab is on finding new treatments for neurodegeneration. As Cathy mentioned, the problem is immense and it's only growing. And if we don't find any new medicine that can serve as a neuroprotective drug for patients, it's going to really cripple society. And so that's what I've dedicated my laboratory work to. And in fact, that's the reason why I came here to university hospitals about 3 years ago. I was recruited by our host here, our moderator, Dr. Mukesh Jain, to lead the Neurotherapeutic Center of the Harrington Discovery Institute. And at the same time, I'm working with the Harrington Discovery Institute to advance some things that we've discovered in my lab, hopefully into the clinic to treat patients as well. And I could just give a brief overview of the work that we do in my lab. Our most advanced and what I think is our most promising potential new drug right now comes from a non-traditional approach that we took several years ago, which was to simply find something that worked in the brains of mice to protect nerve cells from dying, irrespective of how that might work. And my reasoning for that was simply that we didn't understand enough about the brain to recreate it in a test tube or in a petri dish the way that people are able to do with a lot of other aspects of medicine. And so I figured if we can do it, why not just use the entire brain as the test tube? And what that resulted in was the discovery of a new class of molecules that has really potent neuroprotective efficacy. And we didn't have any idea how this molecule might work. That was the non-traditional discovery part of it. Over the past few years, we have learned how it works, and we know that it now elevates levels of energy in nerve cells and helps them survive in situations where otherwise they would die. So for an analogy that I often use is that of a car, automobile, when it works harder, when it has to pull a heavier load, when it tries to go faster or up a hill, it uses more gas. And that's analogous to what happens in a nerve cell when it's been injured or when it's under stress. It has to use more energy in order to keep doing what it's doing. When the car runs out of gas, it dies. And when the nerve cell runs out of energy, it also dies. And the way that these molecules work that we've discovered is to boost up the levels of energy in the cell to let them repair themselves. And we've been really excited about how well it works. It works not just in nerve cells in the brain, which was our primary target, but also in nerve cells in the spinal cord and also nerve cells in the peripheral nervous system. And so it has a wide variety of potential applications. And I'm just really excited to be here, to be at university hospitals and within the Harrington Discovery Institute to push that forward, as well as other efforts that we're supporting.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That was a great summary of your work, and we're delighted you're here as well. And our final speaker is Aasef Shaikh. There's Aasef, and it's all yours, sir. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. Hello, everyone. My name is Aasef Shaikh. I'm trained as a neurologist, and I also do movement disorders and neuro-otology. Now, what that means. Movement disorders, we study neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, dystonias, and neuro-otology, and that what we study is human balance system. A very common problem that many of our patients have is that they get dizzy and they fall. So neuro-otology is the area of science where we study and where we treat patients who have balance problems. And by nature of the disease, Parkinson and balance is very related to each other. And that is something that I do in my day-to-day life in the clinic and in the lab. Now, as we all said, the mission of UH is heal, teach, and discover. So what we do in our clinic is, as we are healing the patient every day, we learn something new. We learn some new questions, and we sometimes learn the answers of existing questions from patients. Our patients, our clinics are our labs. They are our battleground to fight the disease, to find new discoveries. These exciting questions that we get from patients, we take them to our labs, and then we put them in some sort of experiments. We put them in the computer algorithms. We try to study them with more scientific rigor. And then when we come up with a solution, we bring them back to the patient. So this is what we do at UH. We heal, we teach ourselves, we teach our students, we discover, and whatever we discover, we bring it back to the patient. And I would like to share something, the glimpse of what I do for the same mission, the same concept in the process of balance and Parkinson. So I would like to share a little PowerPoint here. So everyone is able to see my screen, I believe. So what I want to show you here is a global map. In the global map, this is a heat map. The red means a high number of falls, and gray means it's not reported. So you see that in the United States or in Europe or even in India or Asian subcontinent, rest of the world, fall rate is very high for 100,000 people. Now, if you correlate that fall rate with the rate of Parkinson, especially in our country, South America, or even Europe, there is a very close correlation between the falls and Parkinson. So in neurology, we call a joke, no brainer. There is no brainer. There is a clear correlation between Parkinson and fall. Indeed, Parkinson is so common that about 10 million people worldwide suffer from this disease. And about 70% of these people, means 7 million people with Parkinson, have frequent falls. And these falls are so bad that they lead to death in some unfortunate victims. And in some patients, they get morbidity, and the cost related to morbidity reaches more than $14 billion each year. So it is a big, big, big problem. And unfortunately, we do not have a right treatment for fall, and that's what we are doing in our lab. We are trying to study balance, we are trying to study Parkinson, and we are trying to marry the two fields to come up with some treatment for falls. What Dr. Pieper does is he studies the molecules, he studies the drugs. What we do, we study the electricity, we study the current. So the brain is all about chemicals and electricity. We focused our efforts on the electricity. So we are doing something called deep brain stimulation to treat Parkinson, and we are extending the application of deep brain stimulation to treat falls. So in Parkinson patients, they get, as you know, a lot of involuntary movements, and those involuntary movements then create some sort of perturbations in their posture. And on top of that, they have issues with navigating in their vision to when they walk around to perceive what they are seeing, when they walk around to perceive their own motion. And when all these things combine together, it creates a big problem with these patients and they fall. So the current state-of-art technology of deep brain stimulation, which is what we call standard of care, is very successful, super successful, more than 90% success rate in treating motor complaints like tremor, dystonia, dyskinesias, muscle tone. But there is a lagging improvement on the visual and spatial navigation. So this is something which is focus of my research. So using state-of-art technology, which is used in institutes like NASA to train astronauts, virtual reality, immersive virtual reality, and computational modeling, we study how brain takes in vision, how brain takes in the spatial orientation, and how it puts it together. And in particular, how we can tease one part of the neural circuit that we know from our non-human experiments, and how we can tease that to make this system better. In other words, we already have excelled in one aspect of deep brain stimulation. We want to excel, and we are well on our way to get there on the other aspect to improve the balance function. And when we will marry together, we will hopefully have a very good success in treating falls in Parkinson's disease. And that is all my career is about. That is all my, my research grants and my research lab is about. And that's my mission, my ambition, and my passion. Thank you.
All right. That was great. I think we can take the slide down.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. We can now open it up to questions. And I just remind the audience that at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat option that will allow you to submit questions. And again, we have members of our team that will field those questions, feed them into me, and I'll share it with our expert panelists. And I'm going to start because I just received one. And I'm wondering, you know, this might be, I might direct this to Dr. Sila. It says that this individual writes that they have a family member who has ALS. He is a veteran, was diagnosed only in the last 2 years. And are there any recommendations for patients with ALS, or new recommendations for patients with ALS?
There are some treatments for ALS. They are not as effective as we would like in terms of specific pharmacologic therapies. And this is where, you know, Andrew's work comes in to try to find very specific and more effective medical treatments. But many patients with ALS are treated in what's called an ALS clinic. We actually have an ALS dementia clinic because some patients with ALS also have cognitive disabilities. And the care of the patient with ALS is more than just trying to find a medication. It's supporting that patient both emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It's supporting the family. It's really trying to optimize their quality of life, extend the amount of time they have, and have serious conversations about how the patient and the family want that care to be, what they prioritize in their life, what's important in their life, and what our options are that can help them achieve those goals. So it really takes a large group of individuals. This is not only different specialties, but it's also different types of caregivers, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, speech therapists, surgeons that may be able to implant a diaphragmatic pacemaker, innovative engineers that have adaptive equipment that allow people to live a full life. So it's really thinking, again, from the patient's and family's perspective about all the things that they need and all the options that we have. And our job as researchers is to increase that armamentarium of options that we can give people to help improve patient outcomes.
Thanks, Cathy. And I'm going to follow up. I think it is the same individual. They have a follow-on question to your comment, which is, can the clinic that you referenced, is that available to those outside of Ohio?
Well, it didn't used to be. Before COVID, though, it was pretty clear that in the VA system, that they were developing a series of telemedicine clinics where they could send a home care nurse out to the family to help the patient. And patients with ALS and other disabling problems like spinal cord injuries, that they could interface with the faculty and the specialists via a telemedicine link. But that was restricted to the VA, mostly because of the way government reimbursement was. Although there were some research projects that were looking at delivering that kind of care to ALS patients. And now with COVID, the ability to provide virtual services in a whole host of ways has literally exploded. And so we're providing about 50% of our care right now in neurology through virtual services to people who can't make doctor's appointments, can't get to the location where the specialist is, are maybe out of state or sheltering in another state and can't make it home to see their doctor. So, for all the bad that COVID is, I think it has really been a profoundly disruptive influence in how medical care is reimbursed and have allowed us to act on our ability to deliver care the way we think patients need care or the way they want care. So I see a bright future for these kinds of collaborations to come.
Thank you, Cathy. I'm going to move on to a question, and Aasef, I might direct this to you because it's related to Parkinson's. And the question is Parkinson's disease hereditary?
So the answer is not all forms of Parkinson's disease are hereditary. The science is making tremendous progress in genetics and the way we identify genetic disease. And we have identified, our colleagues have identified several genes which are related to Parkinson's disease. The studies have shown that Parkinson's disease that generally happens in the younger people, in their 40s, in their 50s, even younger than that, sometimes even 60s, they are more likely to have genetic origin compared to the disease that happens towards later in their life. So Parkinson, regarding symptomatology or the pathology, is very heterogeneous, and in some cases it is genetic. In some cases it may not necessarily be genetic, at least from what we know so far.
So in a nutshell, if it occurs early on, the likelihood of a genetic basis is probably higher.
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks, Aasef. I'm going to move on. This is terrific. We're getting a lot of questions from the audience. The question is, okay. I'm going to this might be, I think maybe Dr. Sila, Bambakidis, Pieper, I think all of you might be able to weigh in. But the question or the comment is this: I am almost 88 years old and in good health. I have trouble recalling names and sometimes words I want to say. Is there anything I can do to improve the recall? I don't know, Cathy, if you'd like to start, and I welcome all our panelists because you're all experts, but maybe we start with Cathy and ask the others to chime in as you feel proper.
Sure. So some of those word finding difficulties are actually pretty common as we get older. And there's an element of it that is really not considered abnormal necessarily, but can certainly be influenced by a lot of different things. There are certain medications that may impair your ability to remember things or retrieve certain words. Some of these medicines are pretty common, like allergy medicines, things you might take to help you sleep, bladder control medications. And so having a good primary care provider who can help go through that list and make sure you're not on something that is impairing your ability. Getting a good night's sleep, you know, there's nothing more regenerating. There is so much activity that the brain does at nighttime when we're sleeping. And if the brain doesn't have a good opportunity to do all that housekeeping, then we wake up with our brain not in the best shape to function during the day. So different kinds of breathing disorders during sleep that are health conditions, you know, things that disrupt your sleep at nighttime, pain and that sort of thing. And then the third thing is that, you know, as physicians, we know that we have to be lifelong learners. You always have to be challenging your brain, learning something new, a new body of knowledge, a new procedure, you know, for many of us, a new task or a craft. The more and more that you challenge your brain, you keep it young and healthy and able to do these sorts of things. I don't know, Nick, Andrew, you've got ideas too?
I think what you said was perfect. In fact, those are most of the things that I was going to say. I would emphasize that a good night's sleep is really, really important, and consistent sleep over time, not just get rest the night before you want to perform well, but a consistent schedule that's regular and supportive. And then the other thing I would say is try to avoid a lot of alcohol, because that can slow your thinking processes and can over time affect your mood, which can also make it harder for you to recall things. But other than that, like Cathy said, just using your brain, interacting socially with people, being active, exercising, but not excessively to the point of exhaustion, but just regular routine walking. Those are all things that will help the blood flow to your brain and help you perform better.
Thanks, Andrew. Nick, anything to add?
No, I mean, I think we touched on the important points. Yeah, I think those are all good suggestions.
Yeah. There's a question that might be more for Nick, for you or Cathy. It's more of a you know, leadership question, I think. The comment is made that there is a lot of work in MS and an MS center, the Mellon Center at the clinic, and are there plans for us to increase support to expand our program?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, you know, in addition to some of the things that we're talking about with respect to brain health and memory, neuroimmunology, which is sort of the subspecialty of neurology and neuroscience that deals with autoimmune disorders like MS, is very important. And in fact, it's a major area of strategic planning for us right now. We have, Cathy and I were just talking about this yesterday. We have active plans to recruit at least one physician scientist within the next year, and also look at medication delivery. One of the interesting things about MS is that the treatment is done over at the Mellon Center, and we do as well in partnership with Seidman, is infusion treatment, which requires you to go to an infusion center and stay and get your medication, like patients with chemotherapy do, for example. But the new treatment on the horizon, the new drugs, in fact, will be administered subcutaneously, meaning just a little shot, under your skin, that you won't need to go to an infusion center. And that's what we're focusing on as a future state for us to be on the cutting edge of that work. So in answer to your question, it's a big focus for us in the near future. And in fact, we do partner with Seidman to offer infusion therapy, because it's still going to be around for the near future for sure. And we like the way we do it, in that we perform these infusion treatments in the community in multiple locations, whereas, with the Mellon Center, you have to come down to the main campus of the clinic to have your treatment. So we think the way that we're looking at doing this, partnering with Seidman in the community and focusing on newer drug delivery where you won't need to have long infusions, is the way to go.
Thanks, Nick. Cathy, anything else to add?
Yeah, we talk about these concepts of pyramids and funnels all the time. So when you have a large system, patients really would like to get care as close to home as possible, but they want to see the right provider and get the right care. And sometimes you have to travel, and sometimes we can bring the care to you. And so if you look at if you think of like from a pyramid standpoint, with the community care, can we bring the care out to the community and out to the patient? But what kind of care really needs to come up to the top of the pyramid? Or in the surgical perspective, it's maybe the funnel, where patients are trying all sorts of conservative treatments or medical treatments for their disorder and are failing those treatments and then need a surgical approach or something more invasive for the treatment of their disease. And I think being part of a 19 hospital network now with over 50 health centers, the Neurological Institute has the central hub, but it's got an east side hub and a west side hub. And we're really trying, again, to look at a patient's perspective. What care do they need? Where can it be delivered? Where can we bring expertise to them to really serve the whole region? Great.
Thanks, Cathy. I'm going to move on. Boy, we are getting great engagement. So please, for the audience, thank you so much for all your questions. So this one, I'd like to start maybe directed to you, Nick, as the director of the NI, and Cathy may, I'm sure, would like to chime in as well. The question is, it's two-part. One is, what are the opportunities for friends of UH, supporters, to help the NI achieve its vision? And then the second part of that is, if individuals do invest in someone's research, what methods or processes are there to report back to them to show, that they're making progress for whatever the area of investment was?
Yeah, so that's a great question. With respect to the first part, we've talked a lot about brain health and memory, and a new initiative that the NI is putting forward, which is related to some of these disorders, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury. We've talked about ALS, very difficult to treat and often have no good curative treatment. And so, for example, we've put together a brain health and memory center, which is really a strong initiative that is focused on providing treatment and capitalizing on the research that we've talked about going forward. It's going to be very dependent for example, on philanthropy, there are many ways one could imagine potential donors could participate depending on their level of interest. In fact, for example, we've been fortunate enough to receive a $3 million gift recently from Bill Reynolds and his family to endow a chair, which weighed our recruitment for a high impact physician leader to join our team. There are many such opportunities to help, whether in clinical program development for patient care or in supporting some of the research you've heard about. And so I think those are all examples. Obviously, the most impactful gift one could imagine would be one which could name a newly aligned Center for Brain Health at UH. But there are other opportunities as well. With respect to reporting about philanthropic research and what's done with the gifts, at least twice a year we have contact points with all of our donors with respect to how the donations are utilized, and that can be as in-depth as folks like. There are people who really want to understand and know what work is being done. There are others who are not as engaged, but at a minimum, there's a twice a year touch point, and often many more. But Cathy, please, and even Andrew can speak more to that.
Yeah, I think those are really important. I mean, really recruiting a very high impact individual who can be a champion and a leader is very important. Investment in that next generation. So some of our fellowships are not funded fellowships. I mean, we work to cobble together money for a salary, just to pay a fellow. Who is really, a board eligible specialist, but they're ready to do that next stage and they could be future faculty. And there's nothing better than training a fellow in our program and then having them join our faculty because they really resonate with our processes. So, fellowship support. Support of individuals that are not thought of as sort of the primary, team, for example, social workers, nurse practitioners, nurse navigators that really help fill in all those gaps and be that shepherd that helps people through a complicated illness and a healthcare system. Programs that help people at home, respite programs, home care type initiatives, and then the whole host of educational programs that we need to do. Taking all these best practices, training other primary care providers, training the community. I mean, the list it's long.
All right, thank you, Cathy. So, for this, the question, there's really opportunities, as Nick and Cathy have said, to provide support across that entire continuum, that slide that I shared with you, be it in the research space, in the clinical space, in the education space. Andrew, you have been the beneficiary of philanthropic support, and how do you, very focused and way, how do you report back and engage with the donor?
I do it on an individual basis, and I enjoy the interaction with donors. And so I find everybody's different. Some people like to have a very deep understanding, and some people like to touch base and get an overview. And I just try to respect what people want and make sure that I'm using their generosity in the way that fits what they want.
Well, thanks. And I think that's what Nick said. I mean, it sounds like twice a year, but again, it can be tailored to the desires of the benefactor. There is a question, it's come in twice because I've been slow to get this question out, so I'm going to do it now. RLS, I assume that's restless leg syndrome?
Pretty good.
Can be severe.
Not bad for a cardiologist.
I know, I'm a cardiologist. I got nervous. I was like, I know ALS, RLS. I had to really, oh, it's good the neurons are still firing. Okay. RLS can be severe and sometimes disabling. Is this disease a neurodegenerative disease that progresses?
Aasef, why don't you take that one?
I will take that, yeah. So RLS is in fact very common. Let me give you one example. I was a resident at UH and with our, it's a disorder that we treat in movement disorder clinic, and we also treat that in sleep clinic. So I was doing a little project as a resident, and my project was we came up with this RLS rating scale. And it was like really simple 30-second rating scale. And as resident, my goal was to collect as many RLS patients as I can collect. Of course, I didn't go to all the RLS patients, but our IRB allowed us to just go and randomly ask people, do you have RLS? So there are certain check criteria. So what I did is I started from Lerner Tower from top floor to the bottom, and I checked with every little person who works there, every nurse, every person, like, do you have RLS? Do you have RLS? And I run through the criteria. And believe me or not, more than 30% of people had it, right? At least they meet the criteria. So RLS, what I'm trying to get to is RLS is so common. In some patients, it is not that severe that they appreciate it. And in some people, it is really bad that is devastating for the quality of their life. In fact, I have a patient or two who are even interested in going for invasive procedure like deep brain stimulation surgery, which may or may not work. It's very flimsy data on it in literature. To answer your question about whether it is neurodegenerative condition or not, so we do see that a lot in patients who have Parkinson's disease, so there and other Parkinsonisms. So there is a very clear clinical correlation between RLS and other neurodegenerative disease, which affects what we call basal ganglia. But there is another very close link of RLS is with the iron deficiency. So one thing people look at, check the iron levels. But to answer your question, yes, there is some relationship with neurodegenerative disease, but we can't tell that it is a neurodegenerative disease because it's quite common disease.
Thanks, Aasef. I love that. You started with the top of the hospital and just worked your way down and asked everybody if they have RLS. Okay, so that's for our audience, that's passion. And you demonstrated beautifully, Aasef. I want to be mindful of time, and maybe I can it's a bit more of a scientific question. So I might direct this to you, Andrew. In fact, I think it is for you. The individual asked that they've heard about amyloid therapy or anti-amyloid therapy for Alzheimer's, but their understanding is those therapies have not been so effective. And so the question is, you talked about energy boosting compounds, and do they affect amyloid?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. As is pointed out, the main target for Alzheimer's has been anti-amyloid therapies. And unfortunately, that has not panned out into medicines that help people, even though they've often helped in various laboratory models. Our particular compound does not affect amyloid levels. And so we have actually put it into pretty rigorous models of Alzheimer's disease and extended studies as long as 2 years. And we help the nerve cells survive. We help the animals function better. We help the brain look healthier, and amyloid just continues to accumulate. And so I think it's pretty interesting that, amyloid isn't the only answer. It's not that it's a bad thing to be considering, but I think we need to be thinking well outside of the amyloid hypothesis at this point.
Yeah. All right. Forgive me for looking off in the distance here, but I'm just making sure that there are no additional questions that have come through. And I don't see any. We are almost at time. Maybe I can ask Nick, you let us off in your role as director of the NI. Any sort of, if you could maybe wrap up the discussion, and then I'll have a few concluding remarks.
Yeah, no, I think really a lot of great give and take and interaction with everyone. I think, again, the key takeaway with respect to brain health and memory in particular is that we are talking about a spectrum of disorders where, again, the treatments that we have currently are very limited. And so when we talk about the opportunity we have in the Institute to enhance and create a future which is no less ambitious than to create a future where brain injury and dementia are prevented, treated, and cured, we're looking at 4 distinctive components, which we've touched on each one of these. One is education and outreach to our patients. A second is to continue to recruit the best and brightest physicians and scientist leaders in the field to add to the world-class team that we already have, expand our clinical care and special programs to our patients with brain health disorders, and then finally to ensure funding for research efforts and spur innovative ideas like those that we've discussed today to move those research findings from the bench to the bedside. So again, I think there's lots of great work going on. We're very excited at what we're doing and really appreciate the interest of those of you who are able to join us today.
Thanks very much, Nick. I think that was just a beautiful summary of you and Cathy and others and your vision for NI, which I think beautifully encapsulates the vision that the health system has across its various biomedical domains: research, education, clinical impact. And so thank you for that. I want to conclude by thanking the audience for taking time out of your day over lunch, as was noted in the beginning, to join us. I hope you found this to be educational, informative, engaging. We are just so very grateful to all of you as friends and supporters of university hospitals. This session that you've seen today we're thinking is the first of what might go on to become an ongoing engagement in sharing research and innovation and what's going on at UH across various domains. So if the audience has any feedback, please do let us know, perhaps by email when you were sent the invitation for today's event. We'd love to have your feedback, not only on what you've heard, if you have any suggestions for the layout and or the organization of the meeting. And again, please look forward to ongoing engagements as we move forward. So with that, I bid you a wonderful day. Enjoy a great, warm, sunny weekend in Cleveland. And many, many thanks to Nick, Cathy, Andrew, and Aasef for joining us today as well and sharing their expertise. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.